What's up, everybody? I'm John Middlekauff. You know what I need you to do. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. We got content for days reacting to every NFL game all the time, every single day. Subscribe, like the videos. Let's go. Welcome to another episode of Three for the Money. And of course, all the lines on the show are provided by our partners at DraftKings. Okay, after a little Thanksgiving hiatus, my main man Stuckey, who was on the grind last week because it comes at you fast. We had a lot going on. We didn't get to talk. Well, since we've last talked, Eberflus has been fired. Ryan Day, I, I I would say in my short list of games in my life, we've seen crazy NFL upsets, but during the regular season, whatever. In college football, that has to be on the short list of craziest outcomes I've ever envisioned. I know it was a 3 touchdown. Was it 22 and a half, 23 points? I don't know exactly what it ended at a kickoff, but Stuckey, long time no talk. We got, championship weekend. Ryan Day is not involved. I can't even, if you would have told either of us that 2 weeks ago, that we'd be sitting here in this game and Ohio State wouldn't be here, it would have been pretty tough to believe, wouldn't it?
Yeah, that game set up for
What was the
every
number?
closed. Michigan took some money, so did the under late. I think it closed like 18 and a half, 19. But Michigan way down. They have no offense. And they threw their quarterback threw for 60 yards with 2 picks. And you have one of the best teams, the best rosters in the country at home, near 3 touchdown favorites, triple revenge. All like everything was there. And to lose that game is I'm very curious to see how Ohio State responds after what now will be a long break before their
Yeah.
first playoff game, which will presumably be in Columbus. We'll see where they end up on the seed line. But yeah, it's pretty shocking that they lost that game and they're not in the Big Ten championship. And a chaotic college football season continues because we have Penn State and Clemson, two teams that probably didn't think they were going to be here last weekend. Clemson after they lost to South Carolina, but then Miami goes down. So then now hey, we got renewed life. Iowa State had to wait till 2 in the morning to see if BYU beat Houston, and now they have new life. They're in the Big 12 championship. So yeah, it's just a chaotic college football season continues. I just don't think that there are any talked about this all season. There's any clear-cut elite teams. I think there will be continued chaos in the college football playoff. If you ask me right now who's going to win it, like I don't even know who I would say. I got to see the bracket. So
Well, and how could you bet Ohio State? I think I saw this morning as the second best odds. How could you bet on them to win 4 games, right? Or 3 games, or what would it take? 12, 8, yeah, 4 games. That's a lot.
yeah, the it just
The
the
bye team's got a
will
pretty big advantage if it's like, obviously, to me, if Oregon wins, they have a pretty big advantage getting a home game and then getting two pretty good setups, right?
well if they win, they would have a bye, and then they wouldn't get a home game. The home games are just in the first round.
Oh, then they go
Um,
to the neutral site bowls.
yeah, but I actually think that if Oregon loses, so I actually would be more interested in Oregon to win it if they lose to Penn State for a multitude of reasons. Number one, I think it's good sometimes for a team that's undefeated to lose before a tournament and kind of refocuses you. And I think Lanning would be able to use that to his advantage. But two, there's a chance the 5 seed is more valuable than the 1, which is crazy. But the way that the bracket sets up is there's a chance that, say, Arizona State gets in and let's say Boise State wins the beats UNLV. Boise State would probably be the 4.
Which is insane, right? Do you agree with that? That's
Insane.
crazy.
And Arizona State would be the 12. So what would happen is if Oregon is the one. Yes, they get a bye, but then they go on a neutral site and play Ohio
Georgia?
State,
Yeah.
maybe Georgia. They lose to Texas, Tennessee, and play a really good team on a neutral field. If Oregon loses to Penn State, they're 100% going to be the 5 seed. And the way that it could break is you would host, Arizona State, and then if you win, you would play Boise State. You play the 4 on a neutral. So instead of playing
Yeah,
the
that's pretty
SEC
big.
team, so you just would have to win a home game over Arizona State, who's down their top receiver for the season. And
So
then,
If Texas or Oregon lose, they'll probably be the 5, right?
yeah, but I think if both lose, you would give the nod
To Oregon.
to Oregon because they didn't lose during the regular season. Um,
Agreed.
but if it's just one of them, then they would get the 5 seed. And depending on how it breaks, I, I do think that there's a chance that the 5 seed is more valuable than the 1, even though you're playing an extra game, which is just crazy.
It
So
could get hard, right? If Clemson were to beat SMU, SMU still gets in and they put them at the 12 and you get SMU 5-12. Like that's a
yeah,
harder game to agree.
there's definitely variables here, but I'm saying like if that's how it breaks and like you get your path to the semis would be Arizona State, Boise State. You can't really ask for anything better. Now, in fairness, it's another football game, and we've seen this year that no one is really safe. So,
Yeah.
and then you could have injuries playing an extra game. But I do think that there's in a sense, Oregon could benefit from a loss. Like they haven't lost this year. It could focus them. Um, and at the same time, Penn State might end up being the number one overall seed, but then I could see them easily just losing in their first game to, the Ohio State or an SEC team
Totally.
on a neutral field. So, and I actually like Penn State a little bit at 3.5. I
Yeah,
make it
I want to talk about these two games before.
okay.
I just really quick on the brackets. Tell me where you stand. I hear a lot of talking points about two things. One I agree with. One I think is a little more complicated. I think you should reseed like the NFL playoffs, right? So you shouldn't just be a bracket style like the NCAA tournament, which my guess you might know better than me is why they did it this way. Because why wouldn't you have just copied the football of, if the lower seed goes on, they play the higher seed. Like, if the 7 seed beats the 2 seed in the NFL, they would play the team on the bye, right? Yet in this, you're stuck in the bracket, which I think most people would agree should be the case moving forward. I do think a lot of people that cover college football and talk about college football say that the top 4 teams should just be the 4 best teams instead of the 4, the conference winners, the way they are now. I do think that gets difficult because then that kind of becomes subjective, right? And the one thing you'd say about the NFL is there's not much subjectivity. Obviously, there's only one bye now instead of 2, but the 4 teams that get home games, right, 1 through 4 seeds do win their divisions. And obviously, not all the divisions on a yearly basis are the same. Like the Eagles division this year is much shittier than I know the NFC West has worse records, top to bottom, but it's like that's just harder on a weekly basis, right? So it's like it's not apples to apples. So I understand like that one's a little tougher for me to just be like, well, Georgia should be the 4 seed or Tennessee. You could because that then we're just arguing like we would anyway, like we used to. Where this one, I'm also of the belief now. I get it. Like I wonder if there's financial lawsuits. Like, why do you have to include a Power 4 team or a not like a Boise State? Like, why do they have to be included? They probably don't want to get sued. But
That's
like,
it.
in what world are they even in the mix to get a bye? Like that's insane. And I'm a Fresno State, come from Boise, the WAC. Like these are I like these schools, but that's fucking outrageous. They are that even Arizona State, if they end up winning for them, like I'm sorry, their schedule playing just random Big 12 teams is harder than the Mountain West, right? Do you agree with that? On a weekly
Yeah,
basis, playing Big 12 teams, playing Kansas, playing K State, playing whoever you're playing, BYU, is harder than playing New Mexico and San Diego State. It just is.
I completely agree. I see. But then here's the counter to that. Yeah, and the reason they included Group of Five is just they're worried about lawsuits, as you said.
Throwing them a bone.
Yeah. Yeah, but the thing is if you reseed, then you're still bringing subjectivity into it because who gets the one, who gets the two, right? You're still just determining that. So I could see, or like just for my, because I get what you're saying with the subjectivity, but I think that I would just we put out the rankings anyway, 1 through 12, and I think that you have to include the group of the best group of five to avoid your lawsuits. The conference champions get an automatic bid, and I do like that because it
I'm
also,
cool. I'm cool with that too.
yeah, it keeps this conference championship weekend
Matters.
interesting. And whereas in the past it didn't really matter as much. But I think that if you just rank them 1 to 12, yeah, you might get the the four and the five. We got to argue that who's the six. But as far as the integrity of the bracket, you wouldn't get it wrong. As far as like Boise as a bye, and then we're saying the five could be better than the one. Like that's insane.
True.
It
Yeah.
wouldn't be the case. So yeah, I could also see this expanding. I also could see something changing with like there's like 14 or 16 teams. So I think eventually like the Big Ten and the SEC are going to say like we want 4 spots each guaranteed every year, something
Why?
like that.
I'd argue they should get that now. I mean, look at the television rating from the SEC once ESPN bought them. It's historic. And obviously the Big Ten, what they bring to the table. I mean, that big noon game, I know they bitch and moan about it, and Kevin Warren fucked them by signing that deal, but they do get their own time slot in the morning, and it crushes, right? I mean, that's the game I typically watch.
Yeah. So I mean, if you expand it to say 16 teams, you could even say five, like five in the Big Ten, five in the SEC. I
Agreed.
think that's where we might be heading. And then, you have your group of five, and you have your Big 12, you have your ACC, and then you have 3 other spots for the best teams, the three next best teams. I think that's eventually where we're headed. But something could change with Conference Championship weekend because, and it's always been like this, and the committee at least came out and said that it could change. They said if SMU loses this weekend to Clemson, then they could fall out, and Alabama would then move in over SMU. If if SMU wins, then Alabama's getting in because Clemson would be out. But like we're punishing SMU for playing its conference championship game. Now, the argument is, well, there's risk there because there's a reward because you are playing for a bye. So, you're basically playing in a way your first round game. But it is a little unfair in a sense.
I agree.
So, yeah, I don't know what's going to happen with conference championship games. There's also not as much interest from a ticketing perspective. Now, the money from because of betting and just fans, the TV money will always be there. But I mean, you look at the Big Ten get-in price, it's like $14, I believe, right now. The Big Ten championship. And a lot of that is because, I mean, Oregon's far away. But if you're like a Penn State fan or an Oregon fan, you already know you're in the College World Playoff. So you really going to go make a trip to Indy to go to the Big Ten championship? No, if you were planning on making a trip to go see your team, you're probably going to go to one of the playoff games, which have much more meaning. And you already know that you're in there. But I don't know the solution to that. But we've seen it in the past that you get punished. Teams have gotten punished. We saw it last year, Florida State. Um, even though they won, Georgia lost. They were out. TCU 10 years ago, Wisconsin 5 years ago, Auburn 2017. They lost in the SEC championship game. They were in the top four. They dropped out. Alabama and Georgia jumped in. They beat Alabama and Georgia in the regular season. So we've seen it in the past. So I don't know if SMU is safe. I think that they should be based on their season. And it's not like Alabama had a stellar year, but still, it's a TV show. Brand names matter. Alabama at its peak is really good. They're probably going to find their way in.
I agree. Okay, let's start with the Big Ten. Uh, Last year, it was a big advantage for Oregon Obviously, they lost last year as a huge favorite, but that game had huge ramifications. DeBoer, Lanning, Washington, Oregon. The winner was going to the playoffs. A lot on the line. Obviously, Washington had been beating Oregon, but it was just an easy travel. It's cool travel to go to Vegas. This is a pretty big disadvantage for the West Coast teams just in general. Especially Oregon's of the four, Washington, Oregon, USC, UCLA, if they ever make it to this game, Oregon obviously well suited to keep going back to this game. But it's just a long travel. And while they are a good traveling team, like this is going to be pretty atypical for a massive game, essentially a bowl game. I just don't know how many of their fans are going to be there. Like what you just talked about, they're already prepared probably for the next game, or whether it's the home game if they lose or after the bye. And Penn State, I saw the thing you saw, $12 get in price. I mean, you can sit like lower bowl, excellent seats for a couple $100s. Hell, I paid more, triple that for the Red River game. Penn State is just a lot closer. And like you could argue this is a bigger game for them. Like, can they finally win a big game? I wonder if this is going to be a pretty big home field advantage for Penn State. Just geographically, it's a lot more people that go to that school, and Big Ten people are just going to be in that area. Uh, I listen. I don't see how. I see both sides. Like, how are you going to bet on James Franklin in a big game? And it also feels like, God, is there just value here? They're almost plus 145. I looked this morning. You're getting over a field goal. Wouldn't you say they're kind of built as similar teams? Defense, high end front seven, quarterback. Both guys can have their moments. Different. One guy's tiny, one guy's big. I would imagine if you just went outside speed, Oregon has better skill guys. Lanning gets talked about really highly, and obviously he's an impressive guy. He's easy to root for. He also lost some big games, before this year, against the dude at Alabama who beat him 3 straight times and he was favored in multiple of those matchups. So let's not act like he's Kirby or Nick Saban right now. Now, I'd take him over James Franklin, but it is a much smaller sample size, is it not?
Yeah, he's not like Big Game Dan or anything.
Yeah.
So
I think he gets talked about like that, though, doesn't he?
Yes, yeah, he does. And like, look, he could have lost another one earlier this year if Will Howard doesn't go. I mean, that inexplicable ending against Ohio State. He also, could have lost to Boise earlier this year. I think Oregon's really good. Do I think that they're in a tier above everyone else? No, I don't. I don't think anyone is there this year. So, and I think Penn State is in the upper echelon, of your top 5, 6, 7 teams. And I don't think there's more than a field goal that separates these teams. I think Oregon's better, but by just 2 points or so. So if you're going to give me over a field goal, I took it. Do I hate it? Yes, because it's big game James. I've seen this story before. But this isn't like truly a big game, right? Like, if this is the playoffs, might be a different story. In a way, like Oregon, like this isn't, in a way they could benefit from it, but I think that they kind of need a loss in a way. Now they're going to try here; they want to win, but I do think that there's just a little more. Like Penn State might be willing to show a little bit more, and I think that this game, as you said, it might mean a little bit more to them. And this is a team that hasn't been ranked number 1 this century, which is crazy for Penn State. So if they win this game, they have a shot to be number 1, and I think they would be so if Georgia wins and Penn State wins, Penn State's going to be the number 1 overall seed and ranked number 1. Where I think this game comes down to,
because the lowest they would be is 2, right? If Texas were to win,
yep.
Texas probably be 1.
Yep. Where I think this game comes down to is I do think that you can run a bit on Oregon, and that is the key to this game. Can Penn State run the ball? They have 2 really good backs, and they have Tyler Warren who just can do everything. They'll line him up at quarterback, tight end, wide receiver. He'll run the ball. Singleton is their best back. He's fully healthy. He's got that burst back, which I think is huge here. I think they can run it on Oregon. Like, Oregon's underlying rush defense metrics are not great. Where Oregon's defense is great is they have great pass rushers. Birch, they have a ton of them and they're deep. And then their secondary, it's not like filled with NFL guys, but there's no weaknesses. but their D line get pressure and they don't have to blitz. So if you're in known passing downs, they're going to be able to get to you, and then you're not really going to find guys downfield, especially if you're Penn State, because Penn State does not have elite receivers. That is their biggest weakness by far. It's just Wallace, and that's it. And they got to throw it. They got to get really creative. Andy Kotelnick is one of the best offensive coordinators in the country. They find creative ways to get the ball to Warren, but they need to be able to run the ball here to stay out of obvious known passing situations. If they do that, I think they can move the ball. And I mean, if you look, this Oregon defense, I do think is a tad overrated. They've played two good offenses all year. It was Boise State and Ohio State. Both met home. They won both by a field goal or less, and they gave up 30 plus in both of those games. Against Boise, they had 2 kick returns for a touchdown to win that game. Now, I know it was way early in the season. Oregon has improved, but I do think Penn State will be able to run the ball. And then the other side of the ball, I do think, but key position to watch if you're just watching this game, not to get too into the weeds, is Penn State's right tackle, probably their best offensive lineman, is out. He got hurt a couple weeks ago. His replacement, he has been hurt a couple times this year. So his replacement, a Wisconsin transfer, Nolan Rucci, he has played, but he's not as good. Can he hold up, especially on passing downs, or is that going to crater the offensive line? That's worth watching, right tackle position. On the other side of the ball, Penn State defense is really good. Can't run on them at all. Like, no one can run on them. I mean, if you just compare these run defenses, like look at the Illinois game. They played like 6 common opponents. Illinois ran 32 times for 34 yards against Penn State. They ran it 32 times for 132 yards against Oregon. Purdue ran it 28 for 85 against Penn State, 40 for 208. I mean, this is an anemic Purdue offense against Oregon. Yeah, I can go on and on down the list. Wisconsin ran for 130 against Oregon. Can't run on Penn State. Dylan Gabriel, you have to pressure him. His numbers fall off a cliff. He doesn't handle pressure well. I think Penn State can get some pressure here. So if Penn State can run the ball and they can stop the run, then I think they're going to be right in this game. It goes down to the wire. So I took the points here. I think it'll be a super close game. And I think a lot of those other ancillary factors, which put it over the top for me, as you mentioned, like location, the meaning to the game, that puts me over the top. I think this thing will close a field goal. So I grabbed a 3.5.
I'm with you. The way you just described Penn State, it's almost like they got to play like some of those Jimmy Garoppolo 49er teams, in 2019 and 2021 to win playoff games. Mucky it up and just get into a fucking fist fight. So you already think about who their opponents are moving forward. You see why they would struggle against teams with their equal talent, because if they fall down, they can't come storming back. But if they're playing what SMU, I would imagine, throws the ball all over the yard, like that's going to be they wouldn't want to play Penn State. That would be it. That'd be it. They out physical them. Where that's where I wonder, like Georgia, Texas. I understand Georgia has had a weird season, but their high end is not really disputable. Is really good, because that you talk about front seven with Penn State. I know you were watching that Georgia game. I mean, number 3 is a CJ Allen. I mean, he looked like, and I mean, he's not even when I close my eyes and think about their defensive play, he's not the guy that comes up like, their linebacker, but their talent up there, when they got to flip a switch, it's like, God, the speed of these human beings is just on another level. And I just wonder, they sacked him 7 times. They beat the shit out of Ewers. Arch came in and looked like a high school kid. And it's just a rough matchup. I can't even, I mean, I would imagine they pressured him almost 20 times in that. They were all over the backfield. And this is the type game for Kirby. It's like they view, like, you're not our equals, guys. It's one thing to play Alabama, LSU, like you're an SEC. They don't view Texas, and this sounds like cheesy or whatever, but Kirby talked about it when they beat their ass in Austin. Like, we didn't come here for the fucking Lamborghinis and the pictures. Like, that's their message against this team. And I just wonder if Georgia, like, I'm a little surprised Georgia's an underdog, honestly. This is a home game for them. It's not like Texas has been world beaters, even though they've been rattling off wins. I mean, every time I look up, it's like 14-10 against Arkansas in the second half. It's like, Jesus, they don't look that great. Now, that was an impressive win against your A&M squad, who you were almost on them making the playoffs. They fucking held pretty close after losing that first game. But I just like Georgia. I mean, I just think, could we look back and go, that's just a bad matchup for Texas?
Yeah, I can see that those are all great points. I did play some Texas initially, but I'm going to be looking to play Georgia, I think at some point
Well,
during the game.
why
So
is Georgia? Why is Georgia the underdog in this game after beating their ass in Austin?
I mean, they've just been so inconsistent all year. Their defense, like in the back end, it's just not the same caliber unit. I mean, that Texas game is their best performance of the year by far. 2 weeks ago, UMass ran all over them. I mean, UMass was moving up and down the field. Georgia Tech, we saw, ran all over them. And their offense too is the weapons are just not there. And they can't run the ball. This is getting in the weeds a lot, but their offensive line, they're all hurt. I, you know, if you had to really ask Kirby, uh, if he could like forfeit this game, I think he would to get the rest to heal up before the playoffs. If it didn't matter, and
Like he'd rather be in Tennessee's shoes than having to play this game.
yes, and they're all their offensive linemen are dealing with injuries, and they were like just like limping around, so they can't run the ball at all, and then that puts it all on Beck, and then their offensive line's hurt. So you're also the pass protection isn't great, but their weapons on the outside are not the same caliber as I mean, look at what McConkey and Bowers are doing in the NFL. You don't just replace I know Georgia gets 5 stars, but you don't just replace those two guys who like McConkey's playing a number one receiver, like one of the best receivers in the NFL. Bowers might be the best tight end in the NFL right now.
I think you mean Tony Gonzalez and Wes Welker.
Yeah. So they just don't have those two guys anymore. And then they're in these known passing situations. And the one constant all year has been the Texas defense. Georgia's offense every week, and their defense to some extent comes out. They come out so flat. That one exception was that spot when they were at Texas. I played them in that game, but they looked bad the week before. It was just like a classic Kirby spot.
They look like the '85 Bears that game. It was incredible.
But again, their offense looked horrible that game again. So it's like they haven't really go back to the Alabama game. Their offense finally came to life. The Georgia Tech game last week, Georgia Tech had 3 defensive backs get hurt in the first half, and then Georgia's offense came back. But Georgia Tech was going up and down the field against them, and then Georgia's offense couldn't do anything. And this isn't a good Georgia Tech defense. Their script is really bad. Like their offensive script with Bobo this year, and then there's the offensive line injuries. The weapons aren't as good. They can't run the ball. So I think Texas, in a way, and Sark's script is usually pretty good. Georgia threw a curveball defensively in that game. They were really aggressive. They're not usually that aggressive. They can usually win with their defensive line up front, but Kirby was bringing it from the start. I don't think Texas was ready for it. I'm curious to see what if he changes it up here, but Texas will be more prepared. Texas just can't get behind. They can't get behind, and that's what happened in the Georgia game. And you kind of need a mobile quarterback if you're going to sit back and throw it against Georgia. So curious to see if Texas just stays in this early. I think they'll be okay, but Georgia will eventually make adjustments. So I'll be looking to get it on Georgia live. I just took Texas under 3. I think they're going to jump out and get a lead. But there's problems with this Georgia team, and there's injuries. And I think Texas, look, they have revenge. They got embarrassed on their home field. This means a lot to them. But to your points are right. Kirby is a motivational master, and he could play that card too. But just if you remove that Texas game, the Georgia results this year have been just extremely underwhelming and inconsistent. Like they haven't put together a full game of good offense and good defense all year, you could argue. So yeah, I think that the strongest unit in this game is the Texas defense, and the Texas offensive line is on another level than the Georgia offensive line. Now, there's an injury at left tackle, but the kid who came in last week, there was no drop off at all. So I think Texas can run the ball easier, and I think they have more speed. Texas has more speed than Georgia at receiver. And we're playing on a fast track here. I think that could end up playing as well. So I played Texas pregame, but and I think they're going to come out, get a lead. Every week Georgia goes down, besides the Texas game. Doesn't matter who they're playing. Yeah, UMass goes right down the field 80 yards in Athens. It goes up 7-0. It's every week. So I think they're going to be down, and then I might come in and look to get Georgia above a field goal. because we've seen them make adjustments. We've seen them make halftime adjustments. So I think it'll be a good game. But I did take Texas pregame under 3.
Yeah, and like as NIL and everything changes, I just pulled up rivals because I saw a headline earlier today that Georgia's number 2 and Texas is like going back between 4 and 5, and that's just on the high school kids. Obviously, when it comes to transfer portal, we know Texas, Ohio State, and even Georgia, they're going to get sweet guys. So just get used to this game because it ain't going anywhere.
Yep.
Okay, let's dive into the NFL. Uh, this number, I just think the Bears are a better team than the 49ers right now. Like you just can't overcome what the Niners are dealing with. I mean, Trent Williams, who is legitimately hurt, just his wife lost the second twin after already losing an
Horrendous.
earlier twin in a pregnancy. Obviously, Charvarius Ward just came back from losing a child. I mean, Bosa had hurt his hip where he was playing through weeks ago, and then he hurts the other one, and he's in way more pain, and it's worse. And Kyle said, as of Wednesday, like, yeah, it's hope so, but I'm not God. So I think it's safe to say, like, it's very up in the air. And why are you going to push him through? All their running backs now, McCaffrey and Mason. Like, I just don't think you can overcome the level of what they're trying to overcome right now. And the Bears, while their scores are close, they actually don't play well early, and they kind of come back when the team, either Lions have a bunch of injuries, so it's like Caleb's playing, he's doing a lot of cool stuff in the second half when they're down multiple scores, but in the first half, not all his fault. Coaching staff, they're in shambles. But I just think they have more healthy players. I just think the Niners are out of juice. So the Bears +4. I kind of like the Bears to just win this game outright, Stuckey.
Yeah, I struggle with this one. I see your points, and if Trent Williams doesn't play, then and it's awful what happened. It's just absolutely tragic.
Well, even if this hadn't happened, he's been legitimately injured and like limping
Yeah,
around, like his legs all
yeah,
fucked up.
yep. So if he can't play, then and then you're down your top 2 backs because the weakness of this Bears D is their run D. They lost Billings, their defensive tackle, and their run D has fallen apart since. But like Guerrero, he can hit some explosive runs, but he's just not the same caliber zone runner than that Mason and McCaffrey were. And is Purdy even fully healthy? Right? Like you
No.
see all those reports about him, like in warmups, he's just like, or in practice. I always see that. I forget the beat Graham, the beat reporter. He just says like he's like lofting the ball. Like there's no. And last week he didn't really. And it was snow, but he wasn't throwing the ball downfield. The arm strength, is it there? Is he fully healthy? I don't think so. But how healthy is he? I don't know. They're just dealing with so much. But on the other side, it's like part of me just says this is this the bottom of the market, right? Am I still selling like the 49ers only 3.5, 4-point favorites at home? Now you have to account for all the injuries.
And even
This
their
is
guys
their
that are playing, like Fred Warner admitted 2 weeks ago he's
he's
got a
hurt, yeah,
broken
which makes sense
bone.
because he's had a bad year. He can't,
Yeah.
everyone's catching on him. Yeah, yeah, it's so I can't lay it with the 49ers. I don't blame you for taking the points here. This is probably this is their season because of the division. So do you get like just one last heroic effort? And they have had a lot of stuff go wrong for them, like just unlucky stuff, kicker injuries, red zone, everything. So like, is this the week that things finally go right? Because the Cardinals are favored against the Seahawks. If the Cardinals win, they go to first place tied with the Seahawks at 7-6. You could be one game back if you win. So if they lose this, then it's all right. Then like the Bears, where are the Bears at? Do you get a head coaching bump? Because that usually you want to bet on teams the week after they fire their coach. And I think in this case it warrants a look because I don't think they liked Eberflus. And but where are they at mentally? So like because they just lost 3 division games in heartbreaking fashion, and they're done now. So their season's over. I mean, it's not like they're not going to try, but just where are they at emotionally prepping for this game? Because now, look, I mean, they're 4-8 in a division where the third place team has 9 wins. Your season's done. But you have a new head coach. There might be some juice there. So I could only take the points, but there's just a lot going on here. I needed to see the final injury report, but it's a mess for the 49ers, which makes that Super Bowl loss just so much more painful. Getting so close, and that was the year. Then these these goddamn Chiefs. That was like last year. The Ravens have always dealt with injuries like every year for like the past 6 years, except last year. The 49ers always have dealt with injuries, except for last year. They were relatively speaking fairly healthy. Both got close. 49ers even closer and didn't get there. And now, Ravens lose their defensive coordinator and their defense has fallen off some offensive linemen, and the 49ers have to deal with all this. It just shows you in the NFL, like once you get close, you can't just assume you're going to be right back there the next year. So yeah, I don't disagree with you, but just a lot going on in this game.
Well, let's talk about those other two NFC West games because they're pretty big. The Bills, it kind of feels like after watching them against the Niners, they got their swag. You look at the rest of the AFC. I mean, the Chiefs have the weirdest 11-1 season in the history of the league. The Ravens just feel like something's off this year, obviously. Uh, it feels like it's their year. Now, this is a long, you're coming across the country, playing the Rams, who I think most people after last year would have thought if they're fully healthy, this is a team to be reckoned with. Maybe not a true Super Bowl contender, but a 10-11 win team, a playoff team, a team that could win a game in January. And since those wide receivers have come back, they have just looked weird. I mean, I had money on the Saints, so I was pretty locked into Saints Rams. They did not look good for a large portion of that game. And they kind of separated at the end, and Derek kind of turned into a pumpkin. But something to me is just off with this Rams team. Now, is this a little letdown spot for the Bills? They still like when you just put their schedule side by side with the Chiefs, like if the Chiefs do slip up, which is very possible multiple times, I mean the Bills end with Patriots, Jets, Patriots. So if they win one of these next two games, like I think there's a pretty good chance that they go 4-1 down the stretch. And
Yeah, the tiebreaker.
yeah, so I think there's still a lot on the line. Even McDermott talked about that because anytime that you clinch a division, how crazy is it looking back that the Jets were favored to win the AFC East like a week before kickoff, and now the Bills clinch on December 1st at home with 5 games to go. So it's a weird spot. Like I just don't take the Rams as seriously anymore. But there's a tough travel game for the Bills. To be a massive favorite on the roads, pretty crazy. It opened up at 4.5. I looked this morning; it was 3.5. I think I like the Bills in this spot. I just something's off with the Rams for me. Stafford's health, the offensive line. I don't know.
Yeah, we'll see. Stafford's dealing with an ankle injury. They say he's going to be okay, but that's something to worth noting. I do think the offensive line is going to start to trend up. They finally have all their starters back. I think what you've seen over the past few weeks is the offensive line continuity wasn't there. Over like the last 4 weeks, they basically just added like one starter back from injury. So like every week, it's a new lineup, and then they're kind of building that continuity. Last week was like the first time they had everyone back. So I think that you'll start to see them trend up front. I just think this is the top of the market on the Bills. It is a team a couple weeks ago, they were laying the same price in Indianapolis, and I have the Rams better than the Colts. That was when Flacco started, and they were laying 4 on the road. They got 4 turnovers in that game, ended up winning by 10. So I think it's top of the market, and it's a tough spot. Just the earliest the team has clinched the division, by the way, in 15 years. But you clinched the division, you look so good against the 49ers, but the 49ers, it was the corpse of the 49ers team. Like they've had some teams that they benefited from some opposing injuries in recent weeks. You beat the Chiefs. Now you're going on the road across the country after clinching the division, flying high. More importantly, I think it's just the top of the market from a value perspective. You got the Lions on deck, like a big game, big marquee game next week. So, and this is the Rams season. Like win this game, you're right there. You lose it and the Seahawks win, you're just not getting a wild card in the NFC.
Yeah, it'd be a big week for Seattle if they beat Arizona, the Rams lose, and if the Niners were to get upset, it'd feel like Mike McDonald is cruising to the playoffs, wouldn't it?
Yep. Yeah. So those are huge results across the NFC West. But I also like some matchup things here. And look, the Bills, this reminds me like early in the year, the Bills, everyone's like, Allen MVP, the Bills are unstoppable. You got to remember, it's the NFL still. Teams are never as good or as bad as they look. And then the Bills went on the road. They lost to Houston. They got blown out by Baltimore. I do think Allen is the MVP. I do think the Bills have a shot at winning the Super Bowl, but just those are signals that we've probably reached the top of the market on the Bills. From a matchup perspective, Bills zone heavy defense, and that has really benefited from turnovers. I mean, they're plus 17 in turnover margin on the year. That's number one in the league. Opponents are 10 of 24 on fourth down against them, 41%, number one in the league. So like they've gotten pretty lucky. And Allen, I think he has some picks coming. He has people last year were complaining about his picks. He had 18 picks. This year he only has five. His turnover worthy throw rate is the same, 3%. So he's just gotten he was unlucky last year, a little luckier this year. But you playing zone against Stafford, not good. You want to play man against him. That with his receivers back, they torch zone defenses, and then they play zone. You need to do that versus Allen. Allen just crushes man because he can run against it, and he's can buy times. He has, I think, 17 or 18 of his 20 touchdowns this year are against man coverage, not zone. So I think that there's some good matchup advantages here for the Rams. It's a good spot. I think we're just now, it's come down to 3.5. I liked it a lot better at 4.5, but I think that this was I actually had 5 earlier this week. I think this is the spot to back the Rams at home. Offensive line trending up, some good matchup edges here. They can get pressure, and I think they can run the ball on Buffalo a bit. So, yeah, I'm backing the Rams at home, but I can see the case for the Bills.
Seattle's owned Arizona over the Pete Carroll era, right? In Arizona. I think I saw a stat that was a matchup that favored them on the road. Now, obviously, new coaches, new players. You were saying early in the season, just wait for Seattle to get some of their players back. It'll be, a big kind of swing. One thing's pretty clear, and I say it every podcast, is if he coached offense, he would be discussed like McVay, like Kyle, like LaFleur, like Kevin O'Connell, but he's a 38-year-old defensive coach, but he's a fucking star. Like this guy, like they didn't call him boy genius in Baltimore for no reason. Like he's really, really good. And
Look at the Ravens defense.
yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, that's why it's my issue with Florio floating out they would trade John Harbaugh. Yeah, they would trade John Harbaugh if Mike McDonald was still on their staff and they could just elevate him to the head coach, but he's gone. And they're definitely not, elevating Monken or was Zach Orr, their defensive coordinator, who shit might get fired at the end of the year. But this feels like Arizona's tough because you never feel great betting with them or against them.
Mm-hmm.
And they've done a very valiant effort this season. Kyler threw 2 bad picks, but even when they were winning games, like they don't have that much talent, especially on defense. Like you remove Buda Baker, like look at what they're rolling out now offensively. When Kyler's right, Trey McBride, James Conner, Marvin, like they got good players. But this is a Seattle team that is just, if you're them, you're starting to smell like blood in the water with the Rams, with the Niners. You control now playing Arizona, kind of built,
Well, and you beat them. You go 3 games up essentially with a win here. You beat them already.
I like Seattle plus 2.5 in this game. And this might just end any Arizona talk about the playoffs.
Yeah, I literally just can't figure out Arizona. So I
just don't think they're good enough. And if Kyler isn't superhuman, if he screws up, they're screwed, which he did against Minnesota.
Yeah, and he did against Seattle. I mean, Seattle shut them down. I did play some under in this game. I think that the Arizona defense, you're right, there's no talent here. But they're like, if you look at advanced metrics, they're above league average against the run and against the pass and overall. I don't know how.
They play hard.
They're well schemed. They don't give up explosive plays. They make you move the ball down the field. Eventually, they make a play or you make a mistake. And yeah, I mean, they're running some just really cool quarter stuff, and I love the way that they're schemed. I mean, I can't imagine what that defense would look like if it had talent. And yeah, I mean, I've always been tooting McDonald's horn, and like the way that you really tell the impact of a coach is not just what they're doing with a team, because some of that is players, other guys to that. But what happens when to
They
the
leave
team
their
where they
team.
left?
Yeah.
And the Ravens defense is is just a mess right now. And Seattle's defense had this downswing, and it was because they were all hurt. Like they had no defensive linemen. McDonald finally like reshuffled his linebacker room, released some guys, traded for some guys. He got his linebacker room to where he wants it. The secondary was all hurt. Now they're all back fully healthy. So now this defense is fully healthy and they're rolling. I mean, they held Arizona to 6 points 2 weeks ago. Last week, I mean, the
One of the
Jets,
touchdowns was a kickoff return,
yeah.
right, for the Jets.
And then they also muffed a kickoff. They muffed two kickoffs in the game. Chenault, just a disaster of special teams. But I mean, the Jets had 250 total yards, 4.2 yards per play. They did nothing in that game. So this defense is trending way up. I think it's undervalued in the market. And I think the Arizona defense continues to be undervalued because people are just looking at the talent. So I think second divisional game, two well-schemed defenses. I think they'll make some good adjustments. So I think this will be lower scoring, like a lot on the line. I don't mind taking the points here because I think Seattle is the better overall team. And I do think the one thing that worries me about the under, the first game was played outdoors. There was some weather. Indoors, it's funny because the Seattle defense is really good, but I think that their defense would be good, fully healthy anywhere. The Seattle offense, they can't really run the ball. They don't have like a complementary offense to, like playing outdoors and being a really good defensive team. Their offense, and Geno Smith in particular, when they're indoors, they look so much better. And they have like speed at receiver and they need to throw the
Yeah.
ball. They can't really run it. Like if you look this year, they,
Well, the
when they went to
Detroit game on
Detroit,
Monday night. Yeah.
yeah, they had like 500 yards. That was like the best performance against Detroit's defense all year when they were healthy. They went to Atlanta and destroyed them. They put up like their offense looked unstoppable. So yeah, when they've gone indoors, and they're like they can throw the ball around, and it's not like Arizona gets a ton of pressure. That's the one thing that worries me. So that could work in your favor too. So I don't mind taking the points. I did take some under.
Well, you think there'll be if we look ahead, let's just say they win the division, they'd be hosting a playoff game. More than likely, they would be the 3 seed hosting either probably Green Bay, Minnesota, potentially. I mean, are they an underdog in that game? Or is that a pick 'em? I know it's a long way to look ahead. Do we like them in a little upset spot there? Or like you said, the rain starts coming down because they would have an awesome crowd, and we have seen them in a spot where they're not viewed going to win that game early in the Pete Carroll era, with the Marshawn Lynch run against the Saints when they were like 7-9 and won the division. I that's just something that could get weird there. That'd be a weird spot to go if you're like a Green Bay, like a 11-12 win team, and you're the 6 seed, or Minnesota, and you got to go on the road to Seattle. It's a tough spot.
Green Bay be favored, but small. Um, and I mean, it would probably end up being like Green Bay minus 2.5 or something. But Seattle has a chance to like close that gap. So that means Green Bay could continue to ascend, but Seattle could keep getting better power rating wise. I think the market as it now has it at like 2.5, 3 would be Green Bay. I would be really interested in getting Seattle at 3. Um, yeah, they're going to be a really intriguing home team, but they could also go, like if they have to go to Minnesota, if they have to go to Detroit, they can hang if they're, they have talent, have receiver. Geno plays much better indoors, and now their defense is healthy. You have to remember when they played Detroit, it was a game where their defense was decimated by injuries. That's when it was the bad version of their defense. So that they obviously would be, let's see, and as of now, they'd probably be like touchdown plus underdogs. in Detroit if Detroit's fully healthy. You got to remember now
Yeah.
Detroit is going through what
Oh,
Seattle's
we're
going
doing this
through.
before the Thursday night game. I think they're in trouble just the way. I mean, they have to
I
sign
agree.
Jamal Adams. Tells you everything you need to know.
They got like 13, 14 defenders on IR,
I think they
which
signed
is
Jamal
insane.
Adams to play him at defensive line. He's the pass
Yeah,
rusher.
blitz. That's all he's good for. So yeah, that the Seattle's going to be an interesting team if they continue trending out, and then their defensive game plan is going to be really good. Now a lot can change. You just look at
Yeah.
the injury situation across the league, but yeah, the NFC playoffs is going to be fun, and you have these teams that aren't going to win the NFC North, and they're going to have to go on the road, and they're going to have to. Seattle's going to have a say.
Okay. We'll end it on this. The Fighting Jim Harbaughs, who are cruising to the playoffs. Who would have thought that? I'm so mad at myself. I was like one of my favorite bets of the year as a future, and I got talked out of it just because everyone kept calling me an idiot. They don't have enough talent, this and that. It's like, here they are, probably win 11 games. There's a spot. The Chiefs, clearly it's just a weird season, right? They just, every game kind of looks the same, whether they're playing the Raiders, the Panthers, or a playoff team. Uh, my first reaction is Chargers +4. Now it's not exactly like the Chargers are world beaters. I mean, they they struggled to get like 200 yards of offense against Atlanta in a dome. Now
They didn't have a first down in the second half.
their defense their defense is good. I mean, they got guys, fifth round picks picking off Cousins and Derwin making plays, and there's a little different animal in Kansas City. That place is going to be rocking. So my first inclination is Chargers, just take them plus the points. It almost feels like too easy, but like every Chiefs game looks the exact same. I guess that's my first reaction. Chargers plus the points, but don't feel great about it. It feels like a trap.
I took the Chiefs here. I can't believe I did. I can't believe I'm saying I think this is the bottom of the market on the Chiefs. They're 11-1. But from a betting perspective, they haven't covered in 6 straight games. And I like they were laying 7 in LA and they won by 7. Now you're laying 3.5, 4 at home.
Do you think that's a huge reason why people talk shit about him? Like if this is when we were kids, like 1996, and you're just 11-1, people are like, "Oh, this team's excellent." But now with gambling, we talk about so much, the numbers we talk about the spread so much, like they don't even come close to covering. That's why people act like they're a 7-win team.
Yeah, it could be part of it for sure. Gambling drives a lot more of the casual
I feel
general
like they would have got
sports
more
scum.
respect for most of my life when you're just 11-1, regardless
Yeah.
how you win. Especially when you're
Uh,
the two-time defending champ, right? It's not like you're just a little engine that could. I mean, this is a team that's won back-to-back Super
I
Bowls.
mean, think about how much respect they were getting and how much love they were getting last year because they kept winning as underdogs in the playoffs and
For
covering.
sure.
It was a different story, but the Chargers have been pretty fortunate too. I mean, they've only beaten one team with a winning record, was the Broncos all year. Last week, I had the Falcons +2.5, probably the worst NFL loss I've ever had. But then I had the Browns +6.5 on Monday night. That was probably even worse. But the Falcons, I mean, they missed a 30-yard field goal indoors. They They had a 98% post-game win expectancy. They outgained the Cousins just throws 4 inexplicable picks, a pick six. They don't get multiple fourth downs. The Chargers get a 2-point conversion to cover. They had 13 yards in the second half. Anyway, you could tell I'm not bitter. But here's what's going on here. I like the matchup for the Chiefs because one, they play a lot of man coverage on defense. Their secondary has not been the same since the injury to Watson. Their pass defense has gotten worse. The Chargers are not the team that has the receivers that are going to take advantage of that, especially if McConkey can't play. He's hurt. He was their entire offense last week. I think it's 75% of their yards. He's hurt. I don't know if he's going to play. If he can't, he's the only guy on their entire team that can beat man coverage. No one else can. I don't know how they move the ball. It happened last week against the Falcons, and he got hurt and they couldn't move it anymore. And that's the Falcons defense. They also can't run the ball anymore because they lost Dobbins. They couldn't run against the Falcons last week. I think they averaged 2 yards per carry last week. They can't run the ball anymore because they lost Dobbins. And now if you lose McConkey, how are you moving the ball? On the other side, they play a lot of zone. On defense, they sit back in their zone. I don't think that's a good idea against Mahomes, especially, and I think this is the key to the game, especially if DJ Humphries, who I think is going to start at left tackle, starts at left tackle. That has ruined, the left tackle has ruined the Chiefs' offense this year. They cannot block anybody. Whoever lines up there is getting immediate pressure. From the last week against the Raiders, they had to kick their guard out, their starting guard out to left tackle in the middle of the game. So Humphries, I think, is going to be a massive upgrade. I think he's slated to start. Reports out of camp are all very good. So I think the Chiefs' offense will look better. So I think that this is, you have McConkey injury, the Dobbins injury. And then look, this Chargers offense was already limited. The talent isn't great. Herbert's awesome. Your tackles are really good. You had Dobbins. McConkey looks like a hit, but they're out. And McConkey's hurt. Dobbins is out. The receivers aren't great. A lot of it was like scheme. And I think the league is like starting to pick up on a lot of their tendencies. There's only, as the season progresses, there's only so much you can do with that receiving talent. So I think this is a good matchup for the Chiefs. This is like the very bottom of the market on them, like covering I'm not asking them to cover 7, 7.5,
No.
13, 14. So yeah,
just win 23-15 or something,
Yep. Yep.
Who's better right now, the Chargers or the Broncos? Kind of the same
Chargers.
team. You like Chargers more?
Yeah.
You plan on betting against the Broncos in the first round?
Yeah, depending on the price. I mean, the Broncos defense is good. If they're like a big underdog. I mean, the Chargers are when
the Broncos
fully
haven't
healthy.
really beat anybody either, right? Neither
No.
of these teams have great wins.
And the Broncos, they should have just lost to the Browns. The Broncos to me are a like dead average team. And the Chargers, when healthy, are a borderline top 10 team. So the difference between them, 2.5 points. Your upside with the Chargers is bigger too, because of Herbert. Nix has played well, but he needs to be like put in certain situations. You can't be under pressure. They need to be able to run the ball. But the Chargers have to get healthy because if they need a healthy McConkey, because their wide receiver room without him is bad, and they need to get Dobbins back. Is Dobbins, if he comes back, is going to be the same. Like he was looking, it was amazing. He looked as good as he did coming off all the injuries that he had. But their run offense without him is bad, and if there's no McConkey, their offense is pretty limited. But I don't think neither team has Super Bowl upside this year. Anything can happen in one football game, but I don't think either could go through the AFC playoffs, especially not with home field advantage.
Well, Stuckey, I appreciate you, and I'm actually that Charger Chiefs game, that's pretty good. I mean, night games, Kansas City getting cold, Jim Harbaugh on the sideline. This is
It'll be better than the Cowboys again on prime time on Monday.
It's Cowboys who?
Bengals.
Oh my God.
They scheduled this Simpsons alternate broadcast.
That's why they couldn't get out, right? Because
they pre-recorded like all this stuff. So it's unbelievable. I mean, I am sick and tired of watching the Cowboys in island spots like 3 times in the last 3 weeks already.
Yeah, it's a joke. Well, have a good week, and college football, it could be exciting on Saturday. So I will talk to you next week when we'll know the bracket, and we'll rock and roll from there.
Absolutely. Have a good one, brother. Enjoy your weekend. I'll see you next week.
Thanks, man.